So let us discuss the organ of hearing or an ear. When we speak about general structure of ear, we can divide it into three parts. External ear, auris externa, which consists of auricula or pinna and auditory canal. The middle ear, which consists of tympanic cavity, here it is, and eustachian tube, here it is. We can see that middle ear is located inside of the pyramis of temporal bone, and also inner ear, which include the Labyrinthus, this blue structure, quite small but very important. About auricula or pinna, it's a lot of structures on it, but I want to demonstrate to you lobulus auriculae, this part, which is very important. This structure, tragus, this structure, which calls helix, and this anthelix. And if this is tragus, so this is antitragus. It's most important structures of cartilaginous external ear, which has a very interesting shape. So you should remember the main structures of it. So now try to recognize what is it. Tragus, what is it? Antitragus, lobulus auricula, helix, and helix. The most important. Then let's more detailedly try to understand structure of middle ear. First of all, this tympanic membrane. External surface, which could be seen with otolaryngologist in the process of investigation of ear. So it is covered by the skin from this side. It has pars tensa, which is dented quite good, and this pars flaccida. And very interesting that here we can see the manubrium mallei, the hammer, one of the small bones of middle ear, calls in Latin malleus, so manubrium, the handle of the hammer, manubrium mallei. And this structure calls umbo, like in anterior anterior wall of the abdomen. We have an umbo, the same principle. And very interesting thing, light cone. Why? Because otolaryngologist, this triangle shape, otolaryngologist, to see the structure of tympanic membrane, use the source of light or the source from the external devices which direct it into the membrane, or it uses a special mirror which also directed the light to the tympanic membrane. And in this situation, this part always has reflex. So it is so-called light cone. And this is another surface, internal surface. And it is covered by mucous membrane instead of skin as in external surface. Very interesting that here above the tympanic membrane there is a special space, recessus epitympanicus. Epitympanicus means above the tympanic membrane, recessus epitympanicus. What is this? Hammer, one of the small ossicles, in Latin malleus. And what is this? Second small ossicle, small bones inside of the middle ear, which calls an incus. So we can see that corpus incudis, this part, most large part of incus, and the caput of malleus, they are located not in the level of tympanic membrane, but above of it, exactly in recessus epitympanicus. So what is the function for recessus epitympanicus? Inside of it, there is most large parts of the malleus and incus. Now let us try to see these small bones, ossiculi auditus, as in photograph. So this is hammer or malleus. It has head, it has handle, and handle is connected with the umbo of tympanic membrane. And also this handle has two processes. This one and this one. Then incus or anvil. It also has a body. We have seen it in recessus epitympanicus in previous slide. And two legs, crus longum and crus brevis, these two legs, and lenticular process for connection with stapes. Here it is, stapes. All three bones are connected with each other through the articulations. And stapes or sternum, it also has head, limbs, these two limbs, this is head, and basis. And basis is fitted in fenestra vestibuli, so-called fenestra vestibuli. So this arrow demonstrates as articulatio incudo mallearis, articulation, joint between hammer and anvil, articulatio incuda mallearis. And here it is, the second joint, articulatio incuda stapedialis. These bones are quite teeny, very small, several millimeters, less than 5 millimeters. But nevertheless, they are very important for good hearing in old men and women. The articulation between bones becomes fibrous, and these people lose the hearing. They hear bad. Again, here it is the tympanic membrane, and we can see this part. What is it? It is handle of hammer. So crus malleus, and now I have removed tympanic membrane, and we can see these three bones together inside of the tympanic cavity. They are located inside of tympanic cavity, but we can't see these portions of bones. Why? Because they are above tympanic cavity in recessus epitympanicus. They are located here. A chain of ossicles transfers vibration to the stapes fixed by an annular ligament of the stapes in fenestra vestibuli labyrinthis. Now, middle ear, the walls and connections of tympanic cavity. This is section through the pyramis of temporal bone. And this arrow demonstrates us parias membranatios for tympanic cavity. Tympanic cavity is this space. We can compare it in the shape with a very small drum, which tympan is a drum which is standing vertically, and the volume of this space is not more than 1 cubic centimeter, quite small structure. And it has several walls. So external ear is here. This is external meatus, acousticus meatus externus. And here it is parias membranatius, lateral wall of the tympanic cavity. And what is this? Another wall, superiorly located, so we can say it is parias tegmentalis. Do you remember in temporal bone there is tegment tympani, this structure, which now is designated with arrow. So pares tegmentalis, superior wall. And this is inferior wall. And it calls pares jugularis. Do you remember that in jugular fossa, in temporal bone, in pyramids, we can find? So where fossa jugularis is, so inside of tympanic cavity, it's inferior wall, pares jugularis. Now, here it is pares labyrinthicus. Here, inside of it, we can find Labyrinthus, very small but important part of inner ear. The tympanic cavity contains air, about 1 cubic centimeter, 1 milliliter. The tympanic cavity communicates with the mastoid cave and mastoid cells from behind through the antrum mastoidum and the nasopharynx through canalis musculotubarius. Here it is, canalis musculotubarius. Do you remember? Canalis musculotubarius. So it has two parts, pars muscularis and pars tubarius. So tuba auditiva or eustachian tube, tuba auditiva, it is one half of canalis musculotubarius, and superior half is musculus tensor tympani. That's why it's canalis musculotubarius. And this muscle, musculus tensor tympani, inserts to manubrium malleus. Here it is, the tendon of this muscle, and it inserts to manubrium malleus for tension of this structure, to tense the tympanic membrane. Now let us try to image ourselves what looks like the pyramids of temporal bone when we make a section through it. We have sected here the place where it was sectioned. So this is pares labyrinthicus. Now we look at this tympanic cavity from lateral wall. Lateral wall was removed. So this is opposite wall is medial wall. And it calls pares labyrinthicus. Why? Because behind of it there is labyrinthus. On this wall we can find two small openings. Number one is finestra ovale, oval. Finestra ovale. Here base of stapes is inserted. You can imagine how it is teeny, very small, several millimeters. And it moves perilymph in so-called scala vestibuli. And now the second, number 2 opening. It calls Fenestra rotundum. Why rotundum? Because really it has a round shape. That's why rotundum. Or another name is Fenestra Cochlea. It is covered by membrana tympani secundaria, and it protrudes when the perilymph moves in scala tympani. So it is two openings on Pares labyrinthicus. And now this wall, so-called Pares mastoidus, we can recognize that this is processus mastoidus of temporal bone. So posteriorly to it, we can find Pares mastoidus. And here, number 3, what it demonstrates us? It is antrum mastoidum, a special, we can say, vestibulum before entering the cellular mastoidum. Inside of processus mastoidus, there are a lot of cellulars, which can be seen here, and we enter in this cellular through antrum mastoidum, number 3. And now, this number 4. What is number 4? It's eminentia pyramidalis, the place of insertion of musculus stapedius. Here inserts musculus stapedius. On posterior wall, we can distinguish the eminentia pyramidalis, number 4. So, in this picture, we have seen two walls. The medial wall, Pares labyrinthicus, and posterior wall, Pares mastoidus. And also, what do you think it is? What this is? Canalis musculotubarius. So canalis musculotubarius contains the tuba auditiva and musculus tensor tympani. So here they are. Semicanalis musculus tensoris tympani and semicanalis tuba auditiva. Now the internal ear, the third part of organ of hearing. Auris interna in Latin. We can say that auris interna consists of labyrinthus, which is presented by Labyrinthus osseus and Labyrinthus membranaceus. Here it is, Labyrinthus osseus. It consists of cochlea, this part, it is cochlea, and vestibulum, this part is vestibulum, and canales semicircularis. Semicircularis, how can we translate? Half of the circle. So, canales semicircularis, here, there are 3 of them, in 3 perpendicular to each other directions. Number 1 is canalis semicircularis anterior. Number 2 is canalis semicircularis lateralis. And number 3 is canalis semicircularis posterior. So Labyrinthus osseus consists of cochlea, canales semicircularis, and they are connected with each other by vestibulum. So question is, how much parts of Labyrinthus osseus do you know? The answer is cochlea, vestibulum, and canalis semicircularis. And it is quite good seeing that three of canalis semicircularis, are in mutual perpendicular directions. That's why when we moves by the head, inside of this canalis, the liquid which goes perilymph and endolymph always is moved. So three canalis with different directions are necessary to move fluid inside of it. And internal ear serves as an organ of two functions. Hearing, the cochlea is responsible for hearing, and understanding of position of our head. When I move my head without eyes, I can feel it. When I move in another direction, I don't need to see position of my head in the mirror. I can feel it by the structures which are inside of canalis semicircularis. And now let us try to image ourselves Labyrinthus osseus in intact situation, like here in upper portion of this picture, and cut it. So we have cut it, and it looks like here in bottom picture. Now the projection of labyrinth onto the inner base of the skull. So Labyrinthus is with blue color, and we can recognize that here on the posterior wall of the pyramis of temporal bone, there is the opening which calls meatus acousticus internus. And through it, this nerve, very important, very large nerve, nervus vestibulo-cochlearis or stato-acousticus, it's the same, pass to connect with the labyrinthus. So, do you remember what is the number of cranial nerve which calls nervus stato-acousticus or nervus vestibulo-cochlearis? Number of cranial nerve. 8th cranial nerve, number 8. And do you remember how much cranial nerves? 12. So it is 8th. Vestibulo-cochlearis. Why? Because there is vestibulum and there is a cochlea. And now, porus acousticus internus and apertura externa aqueductus vestibuli, structures which we had seen last year when we discussed the temporal bone. They are connected with internal ear, with Labyrinthus. And now the MRI picture, MRI image, axial projection through the labyrinth. Here it is, a head which is cutted with MRI method. You can recognize here, what is it? What do you think it is? It's part of the brain, but what part? Cerebellum. It's cerebellum. Do you recognize? What is this? Sinus sphenoidalis. Sphenoid bone has the sinus, an eyeball in the orbit. This is part of the brain. Exactly, it is temporal lobe. And according the Labyrinthus, here it is, quite small, not more than 1 centimeter in length, quite small, but nevertheless we can see here, what is this? Canalis semicircularis, and what is this? The cochlea. So also we can see here the 8th pair of cranial nerves. Nervus, here it is, nervus vestibulocochlearis. So today is possible see the inner ear when we use the MRI image of the head. And now about cochlea. Here it is, cochlea. It has 2.5 turns. First one, second one, and half of third. 2.5 turns. And these 2.5 turns are made around this structure inside of it. The structure called modulus. Modulus. It's bony structure which has a conic shape, and the cochlea is turned around of it. And what is this? It's lamina spiralis ossa. This lamina spiralis ossa inserts to modulus here, and we can see it with green color on the upper part of the picture due to removing a portion of cochlea which helps us to see lamina spiralis ossa. So when we connect lamina spiralis ossa and modulus, this picture could be seen. So it is inserted to the shell of the cochlea, and this is the main structure of it. Due to lamina spiralis ossa, each turns of cochlea are divided into 2 stairs. Stair means scala in Latin, And not only in Latin, in Italian also. You know, in Milano, town Milano, there is very famous opera theater, La Scala. Do you know? So, La Scala means the same. Scala, stairs. Scala vestibuli. And another part, Scala tympani. Scala vestibuli and Scala tympani. This green and yellow arrows demonstrates us the pathways, directions for the fluid which is inside of it. So in Scala vestibuli, the fluid moves in superior direction, and in Scala tympani, it moves in inferior direction. This arrow demonstrates us place in the most upper part of the cochlea, when Scala vestibuli and Scala tympani connects with each other. So this place calls helicotrema. It means that fluid from Scala vestibuli moving from base to the top of the cochlea, then pass through helicotrema and moves in opposite direction from top to the base of the cochlea. And what is this? This small dark dots means very teeny fibers of nervus cochlearis. So through modulus, nervus cochlearis reaches the receptors of hearing, and all fibers are connected here on the base of the modulus into nervus cochlearis. So tractus spiralis foraminosus, it means place for small fibers of nervus cochlearis. Cochlearis, it's part of nervus vestibular cochlearis. Vestibular cochlearis, so this part connects with cochlea, and vestibulo from vestibulum. Now the cochlea in section. Here it is. We have cut it, the cochlea, and look how large nerves are inside of modulus. Very large. One of it, this one, are directed to the cochlea. So it is nervus cochlearis, and another are directed to vestibulum. It's nervus vestibularis. So inside of modulus, we can see the mutual fibers for cochlear nerve. And here it is, tractus spiralis foraminosus. So through it, these teeny fibers connects with each other, forming the nervus cochlearis. So here it is, nervus cochlearis, And here it is, nervus vestibularis. And together, nervus cochlearis and nervus vestibularis. What shall we write down now? Surely, nervus vestibulocochlearis, eighth pair of cranial nerves. And very interesting thing. What is its look like? It's ganglion, ganglion vestibularis. Ganglion vestibularis, very large place on vestibular portion of eighth pair of cranial nerves, where exactly nuclei of the fibers are located. So here it is, another nerve which is placed inside of meatus acousticus internus. Nervus facialis. Do you remember the number? Seventh, sure. Seventh cranial nerve, nervus facialis. And it's the same. It was cutted here for we can see better, but it is same nerve. So my question is, how much nerves pass through meatus acousticus internus? Two. Seventh and eighth. Vestibulocochlearis and facialis. And what is this? What do you think? It is lamina spiralis ossea inside of cochlea, which divides, each turns into two parts. So this is upper part, which calls scala vestibuli, and scala tympani, the second part. So here we can distinguish different details of previous schemes. It's very interesting theme today. Practically, there are no any specimen. Why? Because it's very teeny, very small. It's impossible to demonstrate only using the models. But it's better than model. And now cochlea cut along the modulus, histological specimen. You can see that it was stymied with a special histological stain, and that's why we can see the red color and violet color. So what is this? Modulus. And what is this? Scala vestibule. And very important now to ask ourselves what fluid is inside of scala vestibule? Perilymph. When we use this term, perilymph, surely we should understand that it isn't the same lymph, like, for example, in lymph nodes, in ductus thoracicus. But for some extent, the content of perilymph is similar to it. But terms perilymph means the fluid inside of scala vestibule. And what is this? Scala tympani, and inside of scala tympani, again, the perilymph. we understand that perilymph moves through scala vestibuli in one turn, in second turn, and in third turn. And then through helicotrema here, it moves in opposite direction, from top to the down, and it is the same fluid, perilymph. Scala tympani, scala vestibuli. And what is this? This arrow, what should we write down? What is it? Helicotrema. The connections between scala vestibuli and scala tympani at the top of the modulus. And what is this? Triangle shape part of the each turns of the cochlea. It calls ductus cochlearis. This triangle shape structure, ductus cochlearis. And what fluid is inside of it? Endolymph. May I ask you, perilymph and endolymph, does they mix with each other? Not. It's different fluids. They don't communicate with each other. Always they're separate from one another. And here it is. What do you think it is? This arrow. It's fibers of the nerve. What nerve? Eighth nerve. It's the same. But fibers are very teeny, but exactly in the base of lamina spiralis ossea, also on these fibers are the swallowing. The swallowing calls ganglia. Each fibers contains the swallowing, the ganglia spirale, and very important information. Inside of it, first neuron of acoustic pathway originates. So ganglion spirale is a first neuron of acousticus pathway. And what are this? Again, nerve. What nerve? Nervus cochlearis. Through base of modulus, nervus cochlearis originates. Some questions. Where is located first neuron of acoustic pathway? Ganglion spirale. You are right. Inside of ganglion spirale. So here it is, ganglion spirale. Second question. Where is located ganglion spirale? How can we explain its location? At the attachment point of lamina spiralis ossea to modulus. So this is modulus, and lamina spiralis ossea attaches to modulus. Inside of this point, we can find ganglion spirale. Now, external structure of labyrinthus osseous. So what is this? These are really fenestra, cochlea and fenestra vestibuli, but this dotted line, it demonstrates as vestibulum. It's vestibulum. Portion which are between the cochlea and canalis semicircularis. So how can we explain what is vestibulum? Vestibulum is part of Labyrinthus osseus, which connects the cochlea and canales circularis. Is it right labyrinth or left in this picture? Right, really. So we can image ourselves that these two openings are located laterally. That's why it's right. It is right vestibulum because fenestra ovale, here it is, and fenestra cochlea, here it is, connects vestibulum with cavum tympani, which is located laterally to the labyrinth. So it's lateral portion of it. And again, here it is, the picture which helps us to understand the internal structure of labyrinth. Now, internal structure, we have cut it. And what we can find here, this blue dotted line, what we can find inside of Labyrinthus osseus. Several fosses, a recessus sphericus and recessus ellipticus. Recessus sphericus and recessus ellipticus. This is scala vestibule and scala tympani. And now in this picture, we can see together Labyrinthus osseo and Labyrinthus membranaceus. What is this? What do you think? What is this? It's bone, temporal bone. So it's bone structure. Inside of it, this deep brown color demonstrates us Labyrinthus membranaceus. So it is inserted inside of Labyrinthus osseus like the boiled egg when we cut them is covered by the shell. So the same example. And now, what is it? Labyrinthus membranaceus. Let's try to write down it together. First portion, which called number one ductus cochlearis. Ductus cochlearis is inserted inside of the cochlea. What is this? Number two, sacculus. Another part of Labyrinthus membranaceus which called sacculus. Sacculus is connected with ductus cochlearis by this structure, number three, What is it? Ductus reuniens. Reuniens means connecting duct. What is this? Canalis semicircularis anterior. What is this? Canalis semicircularis posterior. And what is this? Canalis semicircularis lateralis. Anterior, posterior, and lateralis. There are 3 canales semicircularis, but only 5 openings of it into vestibulum. Not 6, but 5. Each canalis semicircularis has 2 parts. Ampullar part with widening of it. Number 7, ampulla. Ampulla membranacea anterior. Then ampulla membranacea posterior. Then ampulla membranacea lateralis. But canalis semicircularis anterior, number 4, and posterior, number 5, they connect together, forming number 10, crus membranaceus communis. That's why we have 5, but not 6 crura of semicircular canalis. And now all these canalis, they are opening to what part of the labyrinthus? This part called number 11, utriculus. This part of Labyrinthus membranaceus called utriculus. And now we need to connect number 11 and number 2, utriculus number 11 and sacculus number 2 with each other, forming number 12, ductus utricula saccularis. So these connections is very small structures which really connect sacculus and utriculus. And then they prolongated into number 11, ductus endolymphaticus. Ductus endolymphaticus. And ductus endolymphaticus has widening part, number 14, which calls sacculus endolymphaticus, which is located in subdural space on the posterior surface of pyramis of temporal bone in the region of apertura externa aqueductus vestibuli. So we can find the structure in apertura externa aqueductus vestibuli. So again, picture from the textbook of Sapin, and you can test yourself what does it mean, each number in this picture. We can compare it with this picture. And now very interesting question for understanding how can we hear. The sound is vibration of the air around us, and this air vibrating should be conduct into the vibrating of the fluid in internal ear, to the vibrating of the endolymph, and how it take place. So again, this picture is from textbook of Sapin, and now it is the same, and let us together draw it. This part, this part, this part. So what is designated by letter A? Porus acousticus externus. Do you agree? Porus acousticus externus. From external ear, this opening to the bone, temporal bone. And what is B? What is B? Tympanic cavity. Cavum tympani. Can you recognize? So external ear was removed, porus acousticus externus then pass to the internal structure of the bone, and here cavum tympani is located. And what is letter C? What is it? It is tuba auditiva, eustachian tube. Eustachian tube. And what is this? It is border between external ear and middle ear. What is it? Tympanic membrane, surely. Number one is membrana tympani. So it limits the external and middle ear. And what is this? Ossicula auditive. Small bones inside of the middle ear. And what is this? Cochlea. And exactly those part of cochlea which has two scales, scala vestibule and scala tympani, and ductus cochlearis. So D is cochlea. And this dark green demonstrates us ductus cochlearis. Number two is ductus cochlearis. Number three is scala vestibule. And number four is scala tympani. And this number five, what do you think it is? that was membrana tympani number 1, and this is membrana tympani secundaria. Membrana tympani secundaria. And now this arrow demonstrates us the direction of vibrating air which pass through external ear from external ear to the membrana tympani. And then after moving these 3 bones, ossicula auditoria, so perilymph is moving through scala vestibuli up to the helicotrema, 2.5 turns inside of the cochlea. And then this yellow arrow demonstrates us that it moves in opposite direction after it through scala tympani. And as a result, this number 5 becomes moving also. This part of the picture demonstrates us that movement of the air around us, the sound is moving of the air, vibrating of the air. That result of it is moving of the perilymph in cochlea. And why do we need to move the perilymph? For moving the endolymph inside of the ductus cochlearis. This 2-directed arrow demonstrates us that moving perilymph, as a result, we have movement of the endolymph, because walls, 3 of 2 walls of ductus cochlearis is quite soft, and only 3rd wall is bony wall. So it isn't soft, it's hard. So this is conducting of a sound wave. Sound wave conducts from air surrounding us into endolymph inside of the Labyrinthus membranaceus. And now again, cross-section through ductus cochlearis, scala vestibuli, and scala tympani. What is this? Number 1. Scala vestibuli, you are right. Number 2, scala tympani. Number 3, ductus cochlearis. Number 1 and number 2 are the parts of Labyrinthus osseus, but number 3 is part of Labyrinthus membranaceus. And you can see that these 3 walls of Labyrinthus membranaceus, of ductus cochlearis, are soft. Really, it's membranous wall. This is also membranous wall, and only this wall is hard because it's bony wall. this wall calls letter A pares basilaris or pares spiralis. Why spiralis? Because this is lamina spiralis ossea. It is prolongating from lamina spiralis osseus. This letter B, what does it mean? It's pares vasculosa. Here, in this pares, in this wall, we can find several small vessels which produce endolymph. So, pares vasculosa. And third wall, letter C, it's pares vestibularis. It also called as membrane of Reisner. Membrane of Reisner. And now letter 4, here it is, letter 4. It's ganglion spirale. So we have learned that ganglion spirale is located in the basis of lamina spiralis ossea. So really, this is lamina spiralis ossea, inside of it, ganglion spirale. Ganglion spirale is the place where nerve fibers has a body of cells, so-called perikaryon. And now number 5, so it is nervus cochlearis. It passes through the modulus aware. And now, where is the receptors of hearing? Where can we feel that something sounds around us? Here, in this portion. So we can magnificate it like this. This quite small, we make more large. And this is the same, but from different picture. So we compare them. And letter A, small a, here it is, here it is. It is membrana tectoria. Tectum means the upper part of the house. So here it is, an upper part for the receptors of the hearing. So membrana tectoria. And what is letter B? So-called tunnel of Corti, surrounded by the pillar cells. Here it is, the pillar cells. Here they are, pillar cells. Here of orange color. And now letter C, here it is C, here it is C. C is external and internal ciliary cells. Why ciliary? Because these structures called ciliars, like cilia in our eye. And letter D, here it is D. It's external and internal supporting cells. So this is a scheme of receptors for mechanism of hearing. The movement of the endolymph here resulting the movements of the cilia, these very small like hairs inside of it. And the movement of these hairs of the cilia results of process formation of nerve impulse. Due to this movement, due to this contact with membrana tectoria, these cells formating the nerve impulse. So receptors of nervus cochlearis is located here in organon of Corti. This is organon of Corti. And we hear when this cilia contacts with the lamina tectoria. And then nerve impulse path through nervus vestibulocochlearis up to the brain into temporal lobe of the brain, where can we understand that we hear something. Dear colleagues, you have seen that practically all this theme is based on the schemes, on the pictures, but not on specimen. Sure, we can remember all the pictures and try to write down by the memory, by the heart. Thank you.